to catch the sprinter in inconsistencies over what happened the night he shot and killed girlfriend Riva Steenkamp. Listen.
I'm sorry, my lady, I'm getting confused.
Why will you be getting confused?
My lady, what I heard, if I can think of now, the door didn't open, so it couldn't have been the door opening.
You see, that's your problem, Mr. Pistorius, and I've dealt with it. You are thinking of a version constantly, and you're not dealing with a question. You're constantly thinking of a version. Is that so?
That's not true, my lady.
CNN legal analyst Kelly Phelps at the courthouse in Pretoria. You know, the prosecutor, Kelly, said this will be the last day of his cross-examination. He seems to be really, I mean, Oscar Pistorius said he was confused. He's hammering him about what kinds of sounds, what kinds of movements he saw and heard behind that closed door, really trying to trip him up.
Absolutely, and this has been his strategy since he began cross-examination, what feels now like such a long time ago. But it has to be said, yesterday he picked up a lot of momentum in pursuing that strategy with Pistorius, and today has been somewhat more of a stop-start day. He started with lines of arguing around inconsistencies and then dropped them and moved on to another one. So we haven't quite seen the same level of momentum achieved today that he had achieved yesterday.
It's interesting, though, he keeps poking all of these inconsistencies, but isn't that sort of part of his defense, that Oscar Pistorius was confused, acted irrationally? There were these bits of information and stimuli in the room. He freaked out, basically, and started firing through the door. I mean, isn't that what he's saying happened?
Absolutely, and the evidence of these inconsistencies really can be mobilized by both sides to try and support their argument. So we see Nell using it, relying on it to try and suggest that the only reasonable deduction that the judge can draw from that is that he must be lying. But we see the defense relying on some inconsistency, saying, well, hang on a second, on a fundamental level, we've kept our story the same. The fact that small details shift and change in your mind over time is natural and a byproduct of the fear and terror that a person would feel in that situation. And ultimately, the judge will need to decide which version she finds the most compelling.
How is Oscar Pistorius holding up? A couple of times I heard the judge say, you know, speak up, your voice is very soft, Mr. Pistorius, I can't hear you.
Yes, well, actually, inside the court, which most viewers wouldn't have a view to, the volume is much softer than the live feed that we hear over the television. So there's only one microphone in front of Mr. Pistorius that broadcasts just to the judge's desk. So there's not very good acoustics in the courtroom, and therefore we've seen her ask many witnesses during the trial to speak up, because it can be very difficult to follow from inside the courtroom.
Is he as emotional now as he was in the first few days of testimony?
I think he's been a lot more calm and composed today than he was yesterday. Yesterday, he certainly seemed to allow Mr. Nell to get under his skin, and he was quite frustrated and emotional, crying on a number of occasions, and in fact, a few postponements had to be called. Today, we do hear his voice quivering somewhat, but on the whole, he's managed to maintain his composure and also, very importantly, stand his ground in terms of refusing to be led down a path by Mr. Nell, as is essentially opening the door for Pistorius to do that, far more successfully than yesterday.
And Mr. Nell trying to say, you fired at Riva, you shot and killed Riva. He says, no, I did not fire at Riva. I fired into the bathroom at what I thought were intruders. They are deadlocked at that different version of events.
Yes, and this has been the same gridlock, essentially, that we've seen right back from bail, because, of course, very unusually for an accused person, Mr. Pistorius actually gave an enormous amount of detail with regards to his version of events as early on as bail. And that has meant that he has had more pressure to remain consistent with that version, but equally, from Mr. Nell's perspective, it probably accounts for some of the level of detail in his cross-examination, because, of course, Mr. Nell has been able to prepare for that cross-examination as far back as the bail hearing.
Fascinating, and the testimony continues as we speak. Kelly Phelps.